Hey, welcome back to another episode of Feece School. This episode is number 11, and today I'm going to teach you how to produce a film. Welcome back to another episode of Luke Talks, bros. Now, before you even think about producing a film, you have to worry about post-production. So if you already saw my video on post-production, great, but if not, it's right here. So check that out first, because that is the first step to making a film. But once you got all the cast, all the locations done, all the props and everything ready, then this is what you gotta do. So first I'm going to get into camera direction. When it comes to lighting, it varies depending on whether you're indoors or outdoors. It depends on the type of camera you have. Now, if you're beginning out, just starting out with film production, and you don't have a lot of money or means to get equipment, using a phone is fine. If you have a smartphone, that is perfect. I'm sure it's HD, or maybe even some cases even 4K. 4K and HD. HD is 180 by 1920 pixels, and 4K is 4000 pixels, and that's like really high definition. But if you don't have means to get nice equipment like nice cameras, just use your phone to start out with to show what you can do with your skill set. So when it comes to lighting, when you're inside, it's good to have light bulbs that are 100 watts, but it's good to have the correct lighting for the scene. When you're outside, it's good to use natural light, but if it's nighttime, it's good to have sort of electricity nearby so you can light up the scene correctly. It's also good to have a tripod. A tripod, well, if you don't know what this is, that's a little bit sad, but basically a tripod is something that holds the camera, that has 3 legs that holds it to the surface, holds the camera steady, with 3 legs that hit the ground, and you can adjust the legs, basically. So those are some things you must have to produce the film. A tripod, good audio. It's good to have I use a Rode mic, but whatever you can use for audio, if you don't have the means to afford a Rode mic or other audio equipment, just use your phone, make sure the audio is clear and you're close enough to whatever is using to be recorded. Now there's this thing called the 180 rule that you really want to be careful about. So let's say there's a train and you're filming a train, if you have the means to afford a train in your film, and it's coming on from right to left, right to left, and you film on the other side of the train, it would be coming from left to right. So you have to be careful about like perspective, and that's basically the 180 rule. Now frames per second is another thing. So here's an example. I'm currently filming this in, I think, 24 frames per second. It isn't the best. It's actually what I film dollar per day on. It's good for cinematic related things, but if you want good quality, this is what is good for this is going to be 30 frames per second, and this is a little bit cleaner. Now this is 30 frames per second. This is the average you want, but especially if you're going to go in like slow motion where it takes a lot of like frames to cover what you're filming, then you're going to want to use 60 frames per second and then cut it back to how slow you want the film to be. So this is 30 frames per second. Notice how it's a lot smoother. This is 60 frames per second. It's even smoother, and if I wanted to do slow motion like this, I could make that really slow and adjust whatever. So frames per second is good to control, and that's also condensed. People call that FPS, frames per second. It's good to have that in mind when you're making film. It's good to have a microphone, and if you can, get someone to hold up a boom if you can afford that. But if you can't, then be creative. Just figure out ways to get good audio. Now, when you film and you can't if you have audio, but you don't have a way to hook it up to the camera, but you have a way to save it onto some file of some sorts, this is where the clapper comes in. You know when they say, scene 1, action, clap. That clap, you have to sync up that clap to the camera and the audio, because those might not be, when you are in the editing process, you use this clap that when it hits you use that sound effect to sync the audio and the video file correctly. So that is important if you can't. I don't really use that too much because I have a way to connect the audio to the video automatically. So for people who can't, it's good to have that clap. And yeah. Now I'm going to get into directing. If you want to be a good director, you have to put your foot down and say, no, we're doing this scene right now the way I want it right now. And it can sound a little mean, but if you want to make a good film, you have to get people to stop giggling, laughing, and get the film done. It's good to provide food, because if you don't provide food, acting is or whatever they're doing, if they're interviewing or whatever, they could get really hungry really fast and lose a lot of energy. So provide food so they have that metabolism and that circadian rhythm going. And creating a scene is good. When you create a scene, it's good to use the rule of thirds. That's basically when you cut the camera divide the camera and find where the eye flow is that makes the scene look nice. That's what the rule of thirds is. So rule of thirds is really important when making a nice scene and organizing what goes where in that frame. So yeah, and that is basically how you make a good film. If you want more of these projects, comment below. Thanks for watching.